Hello everyone and welcome to another very interesting game, and by very interesting it could very well mean the best game played so far, as it's really an interesting game from the round 5 of the Batumi Chess Olympiad 2018. The match is Armenia versus Azerbaijan, 11 Aronian versus Shahriar Mamedyarov on board 1. And it's really a game, really an impressive showing by both of them, and it really shows you that even though in today's modern age of engines, still it's possible to create something over the board. So without further ado, let's check out this very nice game. Aronian has the white pieces and he opens with e4. We have e5, knight to f3, knight to c6, and bishop to b5, Ruy Lopez. a6, Morphy's defense. Bishop to a4, knight to f6, we have castles and the knight captures on e4. A well-known line, we have d4, bishop to e7, and now rook to e1. Attacking the knight on e4, Mamedyarov replies with b5, this is the strongest response. And now comes rook captures on e4. And now you don't capture immediately here, because if you capture immediately, white can push d5, dislodge your knight to his starting square, and then recapture on e5, and white would be much better here. So instead, after rook captures on e4, first you have time to play d5. Now comes, again, this is all still standard theory, knight captures on e5, and here, again, you don't want to capture the rook. If you capture the rook, you get knight captures on c6 with an attack on the queen. Queen has to move, doesn't really matter where, captures, and then you will save the bishop, and having a bishop and a knight for a rook, white is up too much material. Well, not too much for white, but black would be lost here. After knight e5, we have knight captures on e5 first, rook captures on e5, and only now b captures on a4. And queen to e1. So what do we have here out of the opening? It's only move 11. We have the queen and rook battery on the e-file, not allowing black to castle, as rook captures on e7 would be winning for white. And you can see that Mamedyarov's queen side is somewhat shattered. But the plus side for Mamedyarov is that he has the bishop pair, and if he's able to either castle or perhaps artificially castle with f6, king to f7, then he could perhaps create a very strong attack against white's king, as Aronian's pieces are still somewhat undeveloped. So f6 is played here. And here, this position was already on the board. It's available in the database in 2014. It was played in the Dutch league between Robin van Kampen and Erwin Lamy, where rook to e2 was played. That game was drawn. For this game, Aronian plays rook to e3, and now we have a completely new game, a game that was never played before. c5 Mamedyarov, a very nice idea. He strikes where Aronian is the weakest, as he still hasn't developed any of his pieces. Now, it's kind of hard to develop. Your rook is kind of in the way of your bishop getting developed. You can't go knight c3, because now captures would win you the piece. So you do have to do something about this. After some consideration, Aronian decides to leave the e-file, as king to f7 is definitely coming. There's no way to prevent this. So queen to d1. Now preparing knight to c3, as now the queen is guarding the d4 pawn. We have castles, knight to c3 as planned, and then now rook to b8. Pressuring the b pawn. b3, we have c captures on d4, queen captures on d4, and now comes bishop to d6. You're gonna lose this d5 pawn. You could protect it, for example, with bishop here, but then knight captures on a4 is coming, the knight can come to c5, and you want your bishops to be able to attack, and the bishop on b7 is pretty much in the way of the rook, and pretty much hitting its own pawn. So instead, Mamedyarov has a very original idea. He goes bishop to d6. He puts this bishop on a very active diagonal, and he gives up the d5 pawn. Aronian captures it, and he captures it with check nonetheless. Queen captures on d5 with check, king to h8, and now queen to d3. Not allowing any bishop captures on h2 ideas in the future. Okay, the knight is here for the moment, but you know, that can change. We have queen to e8, a very nice idea, as it was very dangerous. Aronian was threatening to capture the bishop. Now such things would be impossible due to queen to e1 checkmate. Okay, after queen to e8, we have bishop to b2, and now comes bishop to e5. Countering white's bishop on b2, knight captures on a4, Aronian offers a trade of bishops, and now comes rook to b5. first attacking Aronian's queen, and now you have to decide what do you want to do and where do you want to move the queen. Do you want to go to c4, do you want to go all the way to a8, or perhaps do you want to go back to f3? As you pretty much know that Mamedyarov's plan is to go to b7 to pressure g2, and also the queen might come to g6. The bishop is covering g3, so you're not going to be able to confront the queen with the rook, so Aronian decides to bring back the queen to help out with the defense. Bishop to b7, again a nice developing move with an attack on the queen. Queen to e3, and here comes the start of Mamedyarov's beautiful creation. Here a lot of moves are possible. You can simply bring the queen into the attack, you can exchange bishops, bishop captures on b2, but the move Mamedyarov plays is really something else. Bishop to e4. And okay, perhaps this move came as a surprise to Aronian, perhaps it didn't. I don't know. There was no interview with either of them after the game. But you have to decide what to do here. Of course, now you can't capture, as now your queen is unguarded. Bishop captures on h2 would lose you the queen. But after bishop to e4, you could move the rook, which is what Aronian played. Rook to d2, and now comes Mamedyarov's great idea. Bishop captures on g2. So what is really the idea here? This is definitely perhaps even the critical moment of the game, because here you really have to decide what to do. Aronian decided to capture the bishop immediately. King captures on g2. You'll see what happens, and then you'll realize why a move like f4 was stronger. If you play f4 first, before you decide to capture the bishop, yes, this is stronger. As you threaten the bishop, if the bishop moves, you will immediately be able to exchange queens. But then you have to figure out what happens after bishop to b7. And then you say, okay, I'll win a piece back, not back, but as I didn't capture the light square bishop, I'm going to capture the dark square bishop. But then you see queen to c6, and then when you see this position from that position where you're deciding whether to capture on g2 or not, you're gonna decide, no, I don't wanna play this. But then you find queen to f4 if you look deeper, and then you see that you perhaps will be able to defend this attack. Queen h1 check, king f2, and now after queen g2 check, king moves. Black's attack runs out of steam. White defended, and now white is the one actually winning here, as he is up simply too much material. There's no way for you to open the f-file, as the rook on f8 is unguarded. There's no way to increase the pressure here. Queen g1 will be met with queen to f1. And now after queen g5, you will get rook 8 to d1, rook to d8 is coming. White will simply trade down and win this game. But seeing a move like f4 over the board, not gonna happen. King captures on g2 was played, and now comes queen to g6. This comes with check. King to f1, and now comes bishop captures on h2. One more reason why perhaps you could have explored this f4 possibility. But okay, I don't think anyone would be able to find this over the board. Here, rook to e1 was played by Aronian, and this wasn't the greatest idea. You do want to prevent this rook from coming to g5. If this rook comes to g5 and then to g1, it will be very unpleasant for white. But instead of preventing it with a move like knight to c5, also finding a move like this over the board, very difficult. After rook to e8, attacking the queen, now you have to find knight to e6. And okay, it seems like you're guarding the g5 square now with the knight, but then you get queen to g1 check. King to e2, queen to g4 check, f3, and now queen captures on e6. So you win the knight, but now comes queen captures, rook captures, and king to f1. The bishop is under attack, you move the bishop and prevent checkmate, and after rook to d7, it's a pretty equal position. 3 pawns against 1 on the queen side, whereas black would have 3 pawns against 1 on the king side. With this rook to d7, white gains some activity, but all in all, it's a pretty drawish position. Perhaps Aronian saw this, but he was still maybe even exploring possibilities how to win this game. So instead going for this seemingly drawish line, Aronian tries to go and create something beautiful. He decides to play rook to e1. He allows Mamedyarov to attack his king, and his idea is also very nice. Rook to g5, as planned by Mamedyarov. The rook is coming to g1. Now comes king to e2. and now you see what Aronian had in mind. Rook to e8. Mamedyarov is now threatening to capture the queen, and Aronian defends this with king to d1. He simply moves the king, and you cannot capture the queen. Should you capture the queen immediately, you're going to get rook to d8 check, rook blocks, rook captures, queen captures, and after rook captures, this is checkmate. On the other hand, after king to d1, you don't want to capture immediately, but first you play rook to g1. First, Mamedyarov pins Aronian's rook. Now capturing the rook doesn't really do anything, because after queen captures, you can't capture, your rook is pinned. You have to capture here, and then black has a bishop and a queen against a bishop, knight, and the rook. Black is up simply too much material and winning. So after this rook to g1 move, Aronian finds a beautiful defensive resource. He definitely saw this when he decided to go for this entire king to e2 to d1 maneuver, and that is bishop to e5. You cannot capture the bishop with the rook. If you capture here, then again rook to d8 will lead to checkmate. After rook d8 captures, captures, and captures, now black is checkmated. So after bishop to e5, bishop captures on e5. Okay, you do have to give back some material, and now rook to e2, tripling on the e file. h5, Mamedyarov doesn't allow for any checkmate ideas. Now the h7 square is available to the black king. And then now queen to d3. Aronian simply offers a trade of queens. Mamedyarov, of course, declines this. Queen to g2, and now comes knight to b6. Aronian is now ready to bring his knight back into the game. Rook captures on e1 with check, rook captures, and now queen captures on f2. And as you can see, black's position is much better here, not just because he's up a pawn, but his bishop on e5 is a very powerful piece, and since white doesn't have a dark square bishop, he does have a knight, yes, but there are far too many dark square weaknesses in white's camp, and it will be really difficult to come across this. Knight to d5 is played, and with c4, Aronian will also create a very nice outpost for his knight on d5, but that is far less important. There is no way to protect both the a2 pawn and create this very nice outpost. So okay, rook to d8, Mamedyarov pins the knight, doesn't allow for any tricks, and now comes c4. Yes, the outpost for the white knight is created, but you have to give up the a2 pawn, and now you will be down 2 pawns. On the other hand, there really isn't a useful move here for white. For example, rook to f1, yes, you could try and dislodge the queen, but queen to g2. Still, this comes with a double attack against white's knight, and you would have to push c4 here, and again, black would simply capture on a2. So after rook d8, c4 is played, guarding the knight, and now queen captures on a2. Now being down 2 pawns and with a superior position, there really is no way for white to do anything here. If it was a tournament game where every man would play for himself, most likely Aronian would resign here, but it's a team event, so you do have to hope that perhaps your opponent will make a mistake. Queen to f3 was played, and now comes g6, defending the h5 pawn. Rook to e3, and now king to g7, and Mamedyarov improves the position of the king, and now queen to h3, perhaps with some ideas of infiltrating black's position. But Mamedyarov will not be tricked. He plays queen to f2, and now we have to be really careful. If you play something like queen to d6, then you allow ideas like queen captures on e3, the knight is pinned, you can't capture back, and even if you capture the rook, for example, queen e7, king here, queen captures, there really isn't anything for white to do here. Queen d3 check, king moves, and now h4. You'll either push this pawn to victory, even if white checks you, there's really no prospect here for white. White is without a move, black can simply play anything and win. So rook to d3, getting the rook out of queen's way, and now comes queen g1 check. King moves, and now queen to h2. With this move, Mamedyarov is successful in exchanging queens. Queen captures, bishop captures, and now rook to h3. Attacking the bishop, bishop moves back, and king to d3. Okay, white's king is a bit more active, but still, it's an endgame where black is up 2 pawns. There really is no discussion here. a5, preventing b4. We have king to e4, and now king to f7. Mamedyarov also decides to improve the position of his king. King f3, now we have rook to h8. Mamedyarov is preparing to push g5. King to g2, g5 is coming. Now the h5 pawn is protected by the rook. Knight to e3, king to e6. Now we have king to f1, and here after f5, it was in this position. that Levon Aronian decided to resign the game. I think it's really a wonderful game. There's nothing to look for here. Black is up simply too much material. Whatever white decides to play, black will simply push the pawns on the king side, and it will be an easy win. For example, g4, rook moves, h3 check, king moves. Now you have to move the king, not to allow any tricks, but then g3, g2 is coming, the bishop is covering the dark squares, and it will all be over very soon. So yeah, after f5, Aronian resigned the game, and a wonderful and a very important victory for Shahriar Mamedyarov and his team, who are coming into round 6 with a perfect score. Yeah, we've already seen the results. Here you have it. So that's a photo of Aronian with his nice cat t-shirt, which I already mentioned. It's really funny because you know, we all know how much he loves his dog Ponchik. Which I believe means donut in Russian, but still not sure about that. So yeah, I really hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it because it's really, first, it was a really creative line to play. Then Mamedyarov goes for this very exciting bishop to e4, and then sacrifices the same bishop on g2. And instead of going for the drawish line, Aronian goes for that very exciting king to e2 to d1 maneuver. Very, very creative game, and I really enjoy when either players decide to create something over the board. So yeah, I mean, and it's also very interesting, pretty not so, I mean, as you all know, today is Aronian's first wedding anniversary, first year anniversary, so I don't feel all that great about showing a game where he lost on his big day, but also Mamedyarov became a father a few days ago, so, you know, kind of like an even Steven, I guess. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it, and I do hope you're enjoying the coverage of the Olympiad so far. I would like to thank Brady Arundale, Luis Felipe Burda de Oliveira, Michael Buckley, Dan O'Hanlon, and John Torre for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check two of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon. Most likely continuing the Fischer series, but, you know, every day so many games in the Olympiad are played, and I feel I will have to cover most of the interesting ones. So yeah, and I almost forgot, do check, the first thing you'll see in the description below is the last 5 minutes of this game. It's a recording from ChessBase India's channel, so do check it out. Very exciting to see the last moments of this epic game. Thank you all, and I'll see you soon.